involving, well, doping. There's recent scandals that have ravaged the world of sport. Well, there's big-name players like Paul Pogba. We heard a couple of days ago that he's been provisionally suspended by his club, Juventus, after it was found that, or the Italian anti-doping agency, the Italian equivalent of that, has found excess testosterone in his blood samples or urine samples, actually, after having tested him randomly during a game against Udinese that Juventus won. But there's also been Simona Halep, who has been banned for an amount of 4 years for also doping violations or breaches. And I'm joined at the moment by sports scientist Ross Tucker, joining us live from Cape Town. Ross, thank you so much for your time. And let's in fact start with Paul Pogba. I was interested in this one mostly because it's not often you hear that someone has tested positive for excess testosterone. And the first thing that came to my mind was, what is excess testosterone? Because everybody has testosterone, and it's more prevalent in males than females. But what is excess?
Yeah, testosterone is the famous male hormone, and so anyone who's got young children, boys and girls, will understand that when we get to puberty, things change, and those changes in boys are driven mostly by testosterone. So when you think about males, you think about muscle mass, strength gains, cardiovascular system. Those things are all driven by testosterone. So when it comes to doping, what the athlete is doing is they're taking testosterone to try and drive the same gains. And so if you go back all the way to the 1980s, for instance, Ben Johnson, it was a type, it was a synthetic version of the same hormone group that they were using. And so the reason that athletes would use testosterone is because it allows them to train harder, they recover faster, they can lift heavier weights, they become more explosive and more powerful, they get faster as a consequence. And so I think the best way to think about it is, if you can add 10% to your training in terms of quality, volume, amount, you recover faster, that makes you a better athlete. And so testosterone is actually quite widely used by athletes. The reason it's surprising to see a positive test for it is that it's so easy to detect. And so what's happened in the last sort of decade or so is that doping has had to evolve. And so it's almost an old-fashioned drug these days to fail a test for testosterone. Is
it possible, though, Ross, that you can just naturally have more testosterone than the next athlete? Is it possible that it could have been something that Paul Pogba did not take? Well, we have found new information now that there was a supplement that he took which had a warning about it. But just generally, is it something that can be so easily put to a threshold that this is the one that you should have? I suppose the level of testosterone in me is not the level of testosterone in the next male. Am I correct?
Yes to the first question you asked, no to the second. So the yes part is, there are obviously differences. You, me, and someone else would have very different levels of testosterone. So that is normal. But in terms of, is it possible that that's why Pogba failed the test? No, because when they test the urine or the blood, in this case urine, they're actually looking for a specific type of testosterone that they can tell doesn't come from inside the body.
Oh.
So the molecular method they use in testing is able to differentiate or tell apart, this is testosterone that my body produced, and this is testosterone that has to have come from outside. And Pogba failed the test for the testosterone from outside. It's called exogenous, meaning from outside the body. So that's why he's in a very difficult situation, because they know that the testosterone that was found in his urine sample is not his own. And therefore he has to explain where it comes from. And you're right, I've seen the same reports that he's now saying it was a supplement. And the problem he's got is that if the supplement has a warning about testosterone and he took it anyway, then he's guilty. You can't as an athlete claim I made a mistake. You actually have a responsibility as an athlete to make sure that you don't make that mistake. So I don't think that excuse is going to do him any favors, to be honest.
And with a precedent like the one with Simona Halep, already banned for 4 years. Could that be an issue for Paul Pogba then? That there is such a recent case of someone who has claimed that, listen, I was not aware. Will that be his downfall? That, well, we've already banned someone else for 4 years. Are we likely to see Paul Pogba put on ice for a amount of 4 years?
It depends on who hears his arguments and how sympathetic they are. But the challenge for athletes is that the whole world of anti-doping runs on something called strict liability. And what that means is that the athlete is strictly 100% liable for what's in their bodies. And from a young age, these athletes and players are taught that they have to be very careful about supplements because there is a very high risk of contamination from supplements. And so they are told, if you're going to take a supplement, make sure, double check, ask an expert, clear the supplement before you use it. And if they don't do it, then accidental ingestion is not an excuse. And so Pogba will have to convince a panel of people that he did everything in his power to not fail the test and then still failed it. Then they might look at him leniently and give him 3 months, 6 months, 2 years. There are examples where that has happened in the past. But if he can't show that he's done everything in his own power to avoid this test, the fact of the matter is that he had testosterone in his body, he was playing professional sport, then he's guilty of doping. So the responsibility now is 100% on Paul Pogba to prove that it was an accident, and that's very difficult for athletes to do. So I would be, based on what we know so far, and even what he and his team have said, it would be very surprising if he doesn't get the usual 4-year sanction for doping.
Wow. Wow. Ross, that is a big piece of news that you've just given us there. Let's move on to
prediction, not news yet. Let's see what happens. Maybe he has a very good explanation for it, and he can get away with it. But I think the Halep case, which you've also raised, shows that the authorities. It takes a lot to persuade authorities that you have accidentally ingested something and have taken every possible precaution. And what he's saying is that a friend in Miami gave him this supplement and he didn't check properly. That would normally not work, is what I would predict.
Wow. So let's then speak about Halep. 4 years, and this was in the statement that was released, it was said that she was found guilty of intentionally breaching the doping rules. What is, first of all, Roxa does that, and what advantage does it give you, especially as someone who's on the tennis court, who plays a sport that needs endurance a lot more than anything?
Yeah, so first of all, this case, I think, is not finished. She's going to appeal this, and it could be a year before this thing is actually concluded. But the drug that she was found to have in her system more red blood cells. And the reason that's important for sport is that when we do endurance exercise, red blood cells carry oxygen around our body. And so the more red blood cells you have, the better your endurance will be. And so for a tennis player who's practicing, let's say, 10 to 14 hours a week on the court, doing a lot of fitness work, the drug would have benefits for fitness and therefore performance. And it would probably also help with recovery after training. So that it's become, I wouldn't say widely used, but there have been a few cases and a few tales of this drug being used more and more by athletes.
Well, Ross, we're going to have to look at it closely over what you predict will be another year until the Simona Halep case is concluded. She did mention that she'll go to the Court of Arbitration for Sport. We'll continue looking at both those cases. Let's leave it here for now. Thank you so much to Ross Taka, a sports scientist from Cape Town, and head back to Michelle Craig for your X-Poll results.